welcome to the show, and thank you for listening. Got a big guest today. He's a legend, really. Singer-songwriter Don McLean. He truly is a legend. He's all over pop culture with his music and influence. And I just learned today that the song Killing Me Softly by Roberta Flack was actually written about him. And his song American Pie is just, it's a classic that's still popular and played today, of course. And I heard that the song brings in $400,000 a year for him. And he even got paid when they made the movie American Pie because he had trademarked the name. Very smart business decisions by this guy. Of course, most people know the lyric to the song, The Day the Music Died, was written about the plane crash that killed Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper. However, the rest of the lyrics are a little bit ambiguous about that song, and that's on purpose, although some people think the gesture may be Bob Dylan. And what about the king with the thorny crown? Well, Don will tell me who that is in this interview. He also tells me about Buddy Holly's brother and his reaction to the song American Pie. And he'll talk about his success and his struggle in the early days. And he goes down a few rabbit holes too, but I enjoyed all of it. He's an interesting guy for sure. Very entertaining, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. Welcome, Don McLean, to the Chuck Shoot podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm breathing. I don't have any asthma. I'm not on any pills.
Okay. Sounds like a great start. So speaking of the start, your start in the music business, I found your story really interesting. You started out as an opener for James Gang and Blood, Sweat and Tears and all these bands, but
that was well after I started out. I started out in 1964, which was a good 5 years before that. And I was usually on a 3-act bill at like the bitter end in New York City, because I lived in New Rochelle, which wasn't far from the city. And I also went to college at the same time.
Right.
But, when I signed with William Morris in 1969, and I was working on my first album, Tapestry, that's when I got a chance to. I had an agent named David. I can't think of his name, but he ended up being the manager of Aerosmith.
Oh.
Yeah, they write about how they hate this guy because I guess he took things from him and stuff.
Okay.
He was a tremendous agent, and he had a thing called Beatlemania, which was a Beatle kind of virtual Beatle thing, even back then in 1969 no, that was later on in the 70s. Made a lot of money from that, but he booked me everywhere, and I was on the road with Three Dog Night and the James Gang and 10 Wheel Drive and all sorts of people.
Yeah, but so you had an interesting mindset as an opener. You said that you wanted to steal the show and that you wanted to get better reviews. That's almost like a sports mindset. Like you want to beat the headliner. So how did you do that? Was that just like practicing a lot and singing your heart out?
I think I was on a swimming team for about 5 years at a country club in New York called Oriana Beach Club. And this is about 1957 until about 1961 or 2. And we were trained by the coach of West Point. So I guess a certain desire to win a sports thing entered my head, which hadn't been there before, because it was all summer long, really hard work and lots of meets and, competition all summer. God, it was the best thing that ever happened to me when I look back on it. And that was murder getting through those workouts, but I was in the best shape ever. I felt better than ever. And it set me up to go forward. And I think when I was on stage, I said, hey, this is my moment and I'm going to make the most out of it.
Yeah, I like that. So in those years, like before your big success, I mean, you say the climbing up, that was the best time of your life and you didn't care about being rich or famous or any of that stuff. You just wanted to be a musician and write songs.
I love that what was happening was so exciting because what I did was when I was 15 and my father passed away, my mother and I were living in this house where I'd been born. And I was really going my own way completely. I was outside of any of her sphere of influence. And I was finding my way into the world of folk music, as it was back in those days, 1960, around there. And also I was way into rock and roll, Buddy Holly and those kind of songs. But that was all very folkish. You could three
Mm-hmm.
chords. You could play all this stuff. It was all on the same chart. And I had a group that I like called the Weavers, and they were blacklisted in the 1940s, in the 1950s. They were the greatest folk group ever. They invented the genre. They did everything first, and they did everything better than any other group ever. And they had a tremendous sense of artistry, and yet their catalog of hits were things like "Whim Away," "The Lion Sleeps Tonight," "The Rock Island Line," "Irene Goodnight," "The Midnight Special," "Guantanamera." So many songs that became popular when the folk thing really began again in the late 1950s. It all came from them. And they were blacklisted. So I was fascinated with their political problems. And I remember once sending away to Washington for all these transcripts from the House on Un-American Activities Committee. And my mother, I was like 16. I said, "Donnie, what is this?" It came from the government, and she was immediately terrified because a box like that,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
From the House on Un-American Activities, right? And I said, "Oh, they're just transcripts. I want to read, I want to find
Wow.
out
And
what kind of."
yeah, and didn't you reach out? I thought this is crazy. You reached out to Fred Hellerman, the guitarist
That's what
from
I
the Weird,
did.
and that's
So,
not like an easy thing to
but
do
I
back
knew all
then.
this stuff. I knew all this stuff about them before I ever did that.
Yeah.
See, I was getting into this fascinating story of this amazing group. So one day I said, "I'm going to call him up." I just came in my head. I said, "I'm just going to do it." He lives in Manhattan, and I'm going to call him. So I did. He became a lifelong friend of mine. And then I decided I was going to talk to Eric Darling, and he was the replacement in the group. And he said one day, "Well, why don't you come into New York and I was like 16, we can play guitars." So can you imagine that? I mean, I'm now moving from making a phone call to
Yeah.
now being in the living room of a guy who's been on all these records that I've loved, and I'm seeing how he does everything and asking him a million questions. And so one step at a time. And the next thing was a long story. I can't get into that, but I made a tape in my empty classroom in high school. I asked the school if I could use the room in the school. In those days, they didn't worry about lawyers. "Yeah, sure, come on in. The custodian will let you in." So I brought my tape recorder and put my best stuff on there. I had about 10 songs on there. They were all folk type things that I was singing, a lot of guitar playing, banjo stuff. And it found its way to Harold Leventhal, which by a long circuitous route, which I won't bother to tell you how crazy that was. But I got a call one day in 1964 that he wanted to manage me. They thought I was good enough to actually have a manager.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
I come down and meet Harold Leventhal, and there in the office is Alan Arkin,
Yeah. The
and
actor.
Alan Arkin had been in the Terriers, in the 1950s. He was a folk singer. He also did a children's series called The Babysitters Records, and he was just starting his career. So he took me to lunch, and we sat around and talked about this and that, and it was almost like this incredible. I had penetrated this membrane, all right,
Mm-hmm.
and now I was inside. Like a pregnancy of some sort happened.
Yeah, it's like
You know.
you broke through. So tell me about, because you said that you had enormous fear. You used to have fear of
Oh, I
leaving
did.
home and fear of going on a plane,
Oh
stage
yeah.
fright. And so how
Oh
did you
yeah.
push through that?
I just said, "Fuck it, I'm going to do it." And God damn it, do it. I did so disgusted with myself. I said, "Get on the house, get on the plane, go to and I was alone all the time, and I was, out there. But
So like
after,
self-talk, like you're talking to yourself and
yeah, I would just kick myself in the ass and
yeah,
saying, don't ever lay down, don't ever quit, just do it.
yeah.
And the thing about it was that I had a mission, though, that I could see it, and it was developing very, very slowly. And that was more interesting than working at some bank.
Well, right, but you did get a degree in finance. So
Yeah, I
explain that
know.
one to me, because I know you said that helped you reading contracts, but what prompted the finance degree as opposed to like an arts degree or theater or music or even
Well,
English?
I didn't want any of that. And I couldn't take a liberal arts degree because I couldn't learn French or Spanish. I only am interested in the English language. I
Okay.
didn't want to clutter my brain up with a lot of other languages. I love Latin. I took Latin. I learned a lot about English from Latin, but English is all I care about. And so I thought, well, I'll do the business thing. It can't hurt. It's probably going to be pretty easy, and I'll be able to get a degree and spend some of this time because nothing was happening, in any way that would be worth devoting several years of my life to.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like I was becoming a big star or anything. I was home a lot and working very infrequently. And I knew kids like that, who didn't do much, lived in their house. In fact, there are people in New Rochelle right now I grew up with whose parents left them their big house and a big trust fund, and they're still inside there and they're my age.
Mm-hmm.
They never left to go anyplace.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, and also you probably learn more from people that you worked with than in school. Like, I know we talked about Fred Hellerman, but another person, Pete Seeger, was your friend and mentor, and he taught you a lot of great stuff. One of the things which I thought was interesting is everything matters, even the big or small, whether you're doing the
That's right.
Tonight Show or the Chuck Shoot podcast,
That's
you never
right.
know where something could lead.
You always keep developing yourself. You always want to have new ideas. You always want to be rethinking things that you thought were one way because maybe they're not. You always want to keep an open and a flexible mind toward everything. I don't think, I think that Pete Seeger, who was a communist, really, and I'm saying this now, I don't think he would ever say this because he wouldn't want to alienate his following, and the people who are politically correct today would be naturally his, stepchildren. But I don't think he would like political correctness. Because he liked to talk to anybody about anything,
Yeah.
and he would form an argument. And if he couldn't come up with an argument, then he'd give you points and say, well, maybe you're right about that,
So he liked having an open mind.
Yeah, when you have to. And this is the problem now. We're in a dark age now where political correctness has morphed over into assassination by accusation. In other words, for that assassination by accusation to exist, you have to have a closed mind. Because otherwise you'd be saying, well, where's the evidence? Or what are you talking about? Or do you have anybody that saw this or whatever? But that's not the way it is. Someone especially says something and all of a sudden you're tagged. Someone said something bad about you. And that is the sign of a medieval dark age. Witches burned at the stake, the 1950s witch hunt, this is what they called it, when they, took down the names of anybody who cared about reaching out to other countries. I mean, that was the sin that the Weavers, made. They wrote songs from foreign lands. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
So but everything's evolving, So anyway,
Do you think this stuff is cyclical though? Like this is kind of just the sign of the times, and that we're kind of in a political time, kind of like the '60s, and maybe it'll change.
I don't think you should make the mistake of looking back at any decade and trying to connect it to what's going on now. And I'll tell you why we do that, because, or at least one reason why I think. It's not hard for folks to see American Pie with Home Free, the a cappella group. They've done this song again.
Yeah, it's
the
great.
full song, and it's number one on the country video charts for 5 weeks in a row right now. The Home Free version.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
Version.
That's really great.
Yeah, but you don't really think much about it because American Pie is always with us. As all my songs are always with us. All the Beatles songs are always with us. Dylan's best songs, all these songs from the 50s, everything, Sinatra, it's always with us. But think about, and that's because of the way entertainment is and the way we are constantly entertained all the time now. We're almost in a terminal entertainment syndrome of some sort. It'd be entertaining ourselves to death. But if you look back and you took a song, like say from 1900, let's say from 1910, all right, 1910, right around the time the Titanic sunk in 1912, 1910, and you now have a song that's a number one on the country charts since 1960.
Right. 50 years later.
Yeah, but if you think about those 50
It's
years,
very different.
that becomes completely improbable and totally impossible. And the only reason this 50 years makes it possible is that we have mentally become accustomed to falsely thinking that we can reach back and compare things to other things. They're looking back now, when they're saying about the depression, we would have a depression in our country because of all this money that they're printing. They've printed 4 or 5 times the national debt in the last year to try to buy a little time to get out ahead of this virus to make a vaccine. Now that's an immense thing. And they talk about some sort of a blowback eventually, runaway inflation, a big bust, and then a terrible depression. But it's nothing like we were a rural in the 1930s. We were only about 40 million people in the 1930s. Our beautiful environment was pristine. Every animal on the planet was thriving. We weren't using chemicals on our fertilizers and destroying the ocean with nitrogen. We were just using, cow shit or whatever they use, to make things grow in the farms and so on. A much, 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 much different situation. We're in a much worse situation now because we've plundered the earth with 60% of the animals are missing, according to the Wall Street Journal, and they don't believe in any of that stuff. So when they say it's true, it is.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy times, for sure.
Well, it's not good, and but it's nothing like anything that's happened before. That's the thing I'm just saying.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, it's definitely, we could look at some similarities, but it's definitely very, very, very different. And we're evolving in good ways, but also, like you said, some bad ways as well.
Well, I don't know what the good ways are, other than the fact that we have hair dryers and direct TV, and the internet, I think, and that we have everything we want, we seem to, and lots of things in the grocery store. We're not starving.
Yeah.
We're very well taken care of in this country. But I think geez, I hate to say this. I don't know if this is good for your show, but you can edit it out. We're dead last in school. Our colleges have gone way down. They were not what they were in the 1950s. In athletics, we do all right, but we had the greatest athletes, and now we got to send a dream team of professionals over in the Olympics to beat people. What's that all about? What's that all about?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for your role as a musician, you're supposed to be bringing joy and happiness to the world, right? So
yes, that's right.
You made a lot of great music.
Now I'm telling you all this miserable stuff.
No, but so let's go back. So your Tapestry album, that was a really interesting story too, because you feel like you almost died making that record. You got so frustrated that explain this to me. You took the tapes from that record and you threw them out the window into the snow. So how did you figuratively and literally pick up the pieces from that?
Well, there were 30 or more record companies. The number has grown to like 70, but that's not really true. There weren't that many record companies. But every one of them turned me down. I don't care if it's Vanguard Records or Columbia Records. They said no. Mostly because I wouldn't part with my publishing to my songs. But every month I'd have a manager who'd drive me crazy. And eventually I got rid of him. But he would say to me, "Oh, we've got a record deal." I'd be so happy, and everything else. We've got the money to pay off the money. I owed $20,000 because he'd gone in and decided it was a good idea to make the record. Just to heck with it, just make the record. Well, actually, in a way, he was right, because otherwise I would have been constrained. So I made the record I would have made that way, and everything was gold. And then, I'm sorry, they decided they don't want to do it. Down again. So what am I going to do? So over and over, up, down, up, down, up, down. This went on for, I was getting like homicidal, not suicidal.
Interesting.
I would never kill myself, but I might have killed somebody else. because I was really mad.
Okay.
And finally, I tossed those right out the window. I said, screw this, but I just couldn't give up. And anyway, so I was singing. I'd gotten to know Pete Seeger by now. It was
Mm-hmm.
1969, and he was so nice to me and supportive, and he sensed right away that I had something. And of course, that validation helped me, you know, do more things because he believed in me. He said,
Mm-hmm.
you're a great songwriter and a great singer, he said, and he said many other things. But so there was a little party at his house, and about 1969, and it's in a movie called Pete Seeger, A Song and a Stone.
Okay.
And it was done by a guy named Bob Elfstrom, who was a filmmaker from Sweden who lived in Connecticut. And he heard me sing and he said, Don, I want to get some money and make a movie about you. And I was not even known at the time.
Hmm.
I hadn't put Tapestry out yet. I was working on it. And I
Yeah.
was throwing it out the window at that time. So he went and got money, I think like 25 or 30,000 from Swedish television. And he made a movie about me and he followed me around for like 2 years. So from the very beginning, you can see pictures of me going back on the internet, videos where my sleeves are rolled up and I'm sweating and I'm singing Orphans of Wealth or Vincent or so, whatever, with my little 0021 guitar, a lot of tape around the mic and everything. Very young. That's from that movie.
Oh.
So he brought the movie to Media Arts Records that had also a film division, and Media Arts Records was run by a man named Alan Livingston, who's a legend in the record business. He made Capitol Records into the great record company that it is today. And he immediately signed me. And he didn't take my publishing, and he
Mm.
paid off my debt, and he put out Tapestry on the Media Arts record label, and we were friends forever.
Nice.
And so that, by the last ditch effort, but then we were going along and they were doing such great work with me. They put out a beautiful album. And so all of a sudden I was headlining nightclubs and getting a lot of airplay on underground radio. You remember underground radio was FM radio.
Sure.
So I was an FM star behind Tapestry. They had discovered me. That was it. I mean, they play the whole album and just go and get, that was Don McLean. Really cool, wasn't that?
That's great.
Really great record.
Wow.
That was their thing. So the next thing that happens is I get word, because I'm working on the American Pie album now.
Yeah.
They get word, well, Media Arts is going out of business.
Right.
So you don't have a record company.
Ugh.
Again, down again after all that. Well, I said to myself, at least I put the darn thing out,
Yeah.
So, I did that much.
So, yeah, with the American Pie album, I don't know. I apologize if someone else has already asked you this, but I could not find this information anywhere. With the album cover, that thumb, I love that's such an iconic image. Who came up with that idea?
George Whiteman, who was a fashion photographer. And again, that was because of Alan Livingston. That was because of the kind of people that were surrounding me at Media Arts Records. He came up with that.
Okay.
See, when I went off and ended up at United Artists was a shithole record company.
Really?
All they did was put out soundtrack albums that had ugly covers.
Okay.
And that's the last place on earth I ever wanted to be. But they had raised a lot of money and they were going to transform themselves and did into a viable record label. And all those Kenny Rogers hits were on United Artists.
Oh.
So it became a big, important record company. But they started with me, and my success with American Pie funded the change of direction for that record label. But I hated it at the time, and they were awfully difficult to deal with because they didn't know anything. Their slogan for American Pie was, American Pie, love it or eat it.
Oh, that's an interesting one. So wait, so everybody, it seems like everybody has a story about that I've watched a lot of interviews with you and people tell you their stories like, oh, the first time I heard American Pie.
Yeah.
Is there a story that you have from a fan that you remember that somebody told you the first time they heard it or what it means to them that
No,
stands out?
I no. I've heard a lot of stories, and they've all been beautiful. The best story about that was from Travis Holly, Buddy Holly's brother.
Okay.
Now, I dedicated the album to Buddy Holly, and the first part of the song, I've always been out front by saying that's about the plane crash.
Sure.
But it doesn't mention anybody's name in
Mm-hmm.
that song because I didn't want to. Everybody could be many different people. The king, I could say Elvis if I wanted to, but
Mm-hmm.
I said the king had a crown of thorns. Well, the only king that had a crown of thorns was Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was crucified wearing a crown of thorns. So it's meant to be ambiguous so that you can think of many different kingly people in this crazy dream story,
Right.
this impressionistic. Yes, but I always was honest about the front part. Anyway, I met Travis Holly, who looked a lot like Buddy Holly, tall and thin, and said glasses. And he looked at me, and he was kind of nervous. He said, "Don," he said, "I want you to know when I heard you did American Pie, I was driving in my truck. It was in Lubbock. I pulled over. I got out of the car, and I jumped for joy."
That's
Because he
cool.
knew his brother had been memorialized forever.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the effect the song had. So to this day, February 3rd is called the day the music died, because it led to the release of the book, the Buddy Holly story. The Buddy Holly story led to the movie, and the movie, of course, the Broadway musical, and then the ascent of Buddy into this. But American Pie caused that to happen.
That's really cool. See, that's what I'm talking about. Your positive influence on the world. That's amazing.
Well, I didn't know what I was doing, but I guess I did something.
You did something. So, and then once you had that success with American Pie, you could buy a horse, or sorry, you could buy a house and you could ride
I'd rather
horses.
buy a horse.
Yeah. And then, but it's interesting. You said you kind of had an ambivalence towards success. Like you would get hot and then you would hate it and you want to go back and
Yeah.
just ride horses. So explain that more.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be able to wake up in the morning and do whatever the hell I wanted to do.
I like that.
I didn't want people telling me what to do.
Right. That's why you chose music in the first place.
Exactly. And that was the best part of it when I was planning my own life and I was a nobody. I was having a blast because I was meeting these great artists and somebody would tell me, "Oh, you're so talented." I mean, I met so many people. They just right away because they all started doing "And I Love You So." So, Como knew who I was. Mathis knew who I was. Everybody in the business knew who Don McLean was. I
Right.
didn't know them, but I liked their singing. I love that kind of music. And I like rock and roll. And everybody in rock and roll knew who I was after American Pie because of the thing with with Buddy and Richie Valens and Big Bopper. So, but I was transmitting this from afar. I wasn't out there glad handing and being on variety shows and um I didn't want it. I don't want to do what I wanted to do. It made me
Mm-hmm.
nervous. It was enough for me to catch the plane and do the show and get back home again and then deal with my life.
You didn't
Which
want to
wasn't
deal with the lawyers and the business people and the record people telling you what to do. You wanted to just make your music the way you wanted to make it.
when you get to be too big, the pressure is on to stay big and get bigger.
Right.
This is why the Beatles stopped touring. They couldn't take it anymore. What have we done? We've done everywhere we play, nobody can hear us, and the stadiums are full. And where do we go from here except
Mm-hmm.
down?
Yeah.
So they stopped. Um, it's I'm not putting myself, in that, but I did have a very hot year in 1971 and in 1972 where people screamed and passed out and all this stuff when I'd walk in a room. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. So it was crazy, a bit right on the edge of being a little hysteria happening. And I said to myself, I don't think I like this. I'd rather be quiet and think and do some things and have some fun. And meanwhile, traveling was a blast. I got to go all over the world, did several world tours right off the bat that
Yeah.
were hugely successful. And I maintained my success around the world right up until today. I can book a world tour very quickly anytime I want.
Yeah. So let's talk about today. You said 2020 was a great year for you because you did all these things.
Hmm.
You got a YouTube channel and you
Hmm.
have a new album. It's a covers
Hmm.
record, still playing favorites. You have a
Hmm.
movie coming out, a children's book, a play, and then another record of all originals.
That's all true.
So people should check all that stuff out.
Well, I'm always been very busy,
Yeah, it sounds like it.
but I was touring for 50 years.
Yeah.
So I was busy when I was touring. I was busy taking care of my properties. I have a number of homes and I like to decorate them and collect antiques and work on them. And I was doing interviews and I was doing television appearances and I was just very busy with everything that goes along with touring, coupled with raising two children and having these properties that I was always involved with, as well as having horses and all kinds of stuff, and being right on top of all this so that
Mm-hmm.
everything runs smoothly. Because I like to be in control.
Yeah. So, and then
You
are
know,
you mentoring anyone the way that Pete Seeger mentored you?
well, I think no, but I think that what I've done with the YouTube channel is to get and put on there some videos of how I play guitar and sing with the guitar, so that everybody who might be interested in anything from me can look and see how I use the banjo, how the folk banjo was used. Very basic starting point, but
Mm-hmm.
get a whole feel for a different way of using the banjo and the guitar. Well, a lot of things about the guitar and the way I sing with it, and a lot of things about singing, getting the voice out of the body, getting the sound out of the guitar. Um, this is all things that most singers that I see who play guitar do not know how to do,
Mm.
because you can't understand what they're saying, and the guitar playing is in the way almost, rather than it being a synergistic thing, which is out. So
Gotcha. Well, so it's educational. Well, that's great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do this interview. I do like to end each episode with a charity. I know there's a couple that you work with. Is there one you want to highlight here at the end?
well, I think that Roger Daltrey's teen cancer
Yeah.
charity is the best one, because I was lucky enough to raise two children without any health problems, and I have grandchildren with no health problems, and they are both terrific people. My kids, they don't, gamble, and they don't have issues and all this stuff that a lot of, unfortunately, young people have. Um, so I think, and I have known families where one of their kids has got come down with this. And, I
Mm.
mean, it just destroys everything. It's horrible. And really, the thing we have to think about is the fact that we live in a world of chemicals, and
Mm-hmm.
the chemicals are what is causing this. I saw a doctor once on television say, back in the 50s, he said, I'd go to the hospital and I said, let's go visit the cancer patient. He was in the hospital on the third floor, and they go up and see how he was doing. See, now the ward after ward of people with cancer. Well, what's changed?
Mm.
The only thing that's changed is that we live in a world of chemicals. The
Yeah.
environment is dirty. It's completely filthy. And we're reacting to it in
Yeah.
many different ways. Many different ways.
Well, yeah, and a lot of the stuff's in our food. So I think if you can eat healthy and try to eat
Well, you
clean,
have
that can help.
nanotechnology in your food. They have look sometime at I wrote a song called Building My Body, and I do it. You can see me do it on YouTube. It's on the Primetime album. It's when I'm doing at the table, I'm reading every label. You
Yeah,
can
there you
read
go.
every label. Read the stuff that's in this.
Yeah. No, there's a stuff. If you can't pronounce it, it's probably not good for you.
I brought this candy. I thought it was going to be good. Like old-fashioned horehound. You know what that is?
Uh-uh.
And I read it's genetically altered material used. Yep, in the garbage.
Well, good for you. Maybe that's the secret to your longevity here is trying to eat better.
You know what? I'll tell you, keep your expectations very low and you won't ever be disappointed.
Okay.
And be stoic. Whatever comes your way, suck it up and soldier on.
All right.
Because
Well,
it's always a new day tomorrow, and there'll be a good day tomorrow.
absolutely. Well, thanks for the advice. It was fun going down these rabbit holes with you, and you're a living legend. So thank you for doing my
Thank you.
show. I appreciate it.
Nice talking to you, and good luck to you.
Okay. Thanks, Don. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I love that story about Buddy Holly's brother. I'm so glad to hear that. I mean, the interview just, took a few dark turns, but I think the important thing to remember is just how much joy Don has brought to the world with his music. And I really like his story about his struggle and his climb to the top and how he didn't give up. I think that's really inspiring. So, imagine if he had given up and we never had an American Pie. That's kind of crazy to think about. So check out Don's website to learn more. You can check out my website as well, or you can follow both of us on social media to keep up. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen. I appreciate your support. I hope you have a great day. And remember, shoot for the moon.